Okay. So it's my pleasure to be here, and again, immense privilege. I've never been to Central Vietnam before, and I've only been to Vietnam once 20 years ago as a tourist. So getting to know the people here, the food, the sites, the history has been amazing. And thank you so much for your hospitality, Dr. Ren and all the organizers of AFSUMB 2026. So on that note, I am going to give several lectures today. I welcome, of course, feedback, questions, suggestions. I want to open with the first one, which I understand is a hot and exciting topic for many, and that makes me very happy to hear that, because that's something I've worked on with my colleagues for a number of years now, and that is Rads. Okay? And of course, at this particular meeting, where we're ultrasound focused, we're going to be talking about the ultrasound component of Rads. But before we talk about ultrasound, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background as to how Rads is shaped. Because as we talked about in the early morning MTE Meet the Expert session, that breast imaging, including breast ultrasound, does not stand alone with any one modality. It is really all the modalities together that is necessary for optimal patient care. So on that note, this is Rads, our friend, okay? And these are the older versions, so you may not recognize them as much. And let's see what does Rads stand for. Whenever we have a B in breast imaging, B is going to be breast, right? Okay. So Rads, B-I-R-A-D-S, that stands for Breast Imaging Reporting and Data System, Rads. And on the left is the 4th edition, which was published in 2003, and on the right is the 5th edition, published in 2013. Okay. Now, what is Rads? It is a standardized language to communicate, which in turn provides guidance for image interpretation and assessment, allowing for improved patient care. So there are a number of words in that statement. Language is one. Okay? Standardized is another. That is common. We accept it as what's proper. And what do we use it for? Well, we're radiologists, but we're radiologists who are going to interpret the image and assess the image. When I say we're radiologists, because that's my usual audience, but I understand, we may have surgeons in this room, or cardiologists, or obstetricians who do ultrasound, but we're physicians who do images, okay? So image interpretation and assessment. How do you read the image, and what do you do with the image, the information? That's the assessment part. Ultimately, improve patient care. And that's what we're after. Okay? So that we help our patients. So standardized language, communicate, interpretation, assessment, improve patient care. So if you remember nothing about Rads, please remember that slide. Words matter. Since COVID-19, when we have a lot more virtual communications, in the United States, I don't know how much you follow American politics, we have sort of different groups that are often fighting with each other in our political system. But the words that we use in discussion and debate matter. So words matter. What you use, your standardized language, your Rads term, it matters for patient care. It also matters, of course, in real life situations like politics, that we have in many parts of the world. Words will help you unite, work with others, assist, collaborate, connect, etc., etc. Now remember the 1990s. Anybody here? I met our volunteer translators earlier. They're very young, so no, but they remember a lot of this. Remember the 1990s? Okay, I see Dr. Wen, I see, our president, AFSUMB. Thank you for being here. Remember the 1990s? Okay. Dr. Chu and I do remember the 1990s. Okay. I heard that name of some of those famous movie stars from the 1990s. That's true? Yeah? Did I get that right? Or did Google Gemini help me with this? Okay. But I'm not so familiar with the Vietnamese TV and movies in the 1990s, but I am very much an American, loved TV, loved the movies. Okay, so 1990s Britney Spears. Okay, remember her music? I know she's in a back then when music first went around. Remember the Spice Girls, which was a very popular British selling girl group, in the 1990s, and American TV and movie stars, Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt, right? They were famous and they were married at that time, and married to each other. Okay, you believe that in the 1990s. Now, why do I bring up the 1990s? It is because that's when Rads started. Okay, it is a product of the American College of Radiology, ACR. And this product started in response to the need. The need being that in the late 1980s and early 1990s, that's when screening mammography was being widely implemented across the United States. So until then, we didn't, have this massive need for a lot of image studies to be interpreted in a standard fashion. But now we do, right? And in order to make this efficient and efficacious, we need to show that we can talk to each other and that we can find cancers, we can help the patient to reduce mortality, and that we don't have too many false positives. And with all that, you need the standardized language, and that was Rads, formed as a response to the widely implemented screening mammography that was happening in the United States, okay, around that time. So the first three editions, 1993, 1995, 1998. And then came the fourth edition, which was 2023. And that was very significant because first, second, and third only had mammography. But then in the fourth edition, we have the additional sections. And those are breast ultrasound, yay, what we're here today, and breast MRI. Okay? And in the fifth edition, 2013, supplements were added to the section of mammography, and those are digital breast tomosynthesis and contrast-enhanced mammography. So in the fifth edition, you have mammography, and in mammography, you have 2D mammography, you have tomosynthesis, you have contrast-enhanced mammography. Then you also have ultrasound, and you also have MRI. Okay, all right. Large sphere of influence. We want impact. Okay, we want to communicate. We want to reach a wide audience. How wide is wide? Well, look at what this. Okay, all the other Rads, right? I know that the problem. How many of you do liver ultrasound in this room? Can I see you raise your hands? Yeah. So at least 20-30%, right? So you have live Rads, okay, for your liver. You have high Rads for prostate. That we also do ultrasound. We have high Rads for thyroid. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, there are a lot of Rads. Okay, there are a lot of Rads now. But remember that BI-RADS, this one, is the original. Okay, I would like to think I only do breast imaging. I'm very proud of that. We'll say we are the original of the Rads. Okay, which then influence all the other Rads, which are relatively recent. So BI-RADS is the original. Okay, how many languages do you think BI-RADS has been translated into? Take a guess. 20? Okay, 20. How about 5? Too low? Just a random guess. Well, the answer with the 5th edition is 8. Okay? And these are the 8: Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, Russian, Croatian, Romanian, and Chinese. And you can say, well, maybe Spanish, maybe Chinese, maybe, but why like Croatian or Romanian? Many interesting stories behind that. Many who are volunteers from around the world. Okay? And I work on the Rads committee, and we've done volunteers for like Arabic, for like Turkish, for Indonesian. Okay? So any volunteers in the room for Vietnamese, let me know. Okay? Of course, we want to make this accessible around the world. Did you have a question? No. Oh, you're the volunteer. Everyone's going to volunteer. Okay, here we are. We're volunteer number 1. Okay, all right. So we're going to talk in terms of the American College of Radiology. There are many legal aspects of it. We're going to start talking about it in about 4 to 6 months for translation. All right. So I want to show you this. This is called a reference card. And a reference card is a little bit of a mini version of BI-RADS that you have. This is from the 5th edition: mammography, ultrasound, MRI, and then you have the assessment categories. And it gives you a brief summary, but the important part of this that's nice is that it is free. Okay? I know Rads can be very expensive to purchase, but this is freely available online. You can download. Very, very useful. This is the 5th edition. The new edition, the V 2025, is not yet available, but it will be available sometime, hopefully in the near future. For sure this year, 2026. Okay? All right. So, what about the organizational changes? Note that we don't call it the 6th edition. Okay? It's not like 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. Not 6th edition. You're like, well, why not? Anybody know why not? Okay. I'll tell you why. This is a secret why. Okay. Why is because live Rads, high Rads, high Rads, the thyroid, the prostate, the liver, lung Rads. Okay? They don't call it 1st, 2nd, 3rd edition. They call it the version of whatever year. So we're like, oh, what's special? What breast pictures? We started this. We want to call it 6th edition. But the ACR, American College of Radiologists, says no. You have to be part of the family. Okay? So we're not 6th edition, we're V 2025, version 2025. To be aligned, similar to high Rads, live Rads, lung Rads, etc., etc. Okay? So V 2025 is no longer called a lexicon and atlas, but it's called a manual. Okay? Because it has a lot of patient management discussions, not just pictures and words. So it's Rads V 2025 manual. And in it, of course, we have mammography, we have ultrasound, we have MRI, and excitingly, we have something else now, CEM, contrast enhanced mammography. Formerly, contrast enhanced mammography was a supplement in mammography, but now we have it separate because it's recognized it's kind of like MRI a little bit, it's vascular based, but it's also a little bit like mammography, so let's give it a separate section, recognition. So that's the CEM, and then lastly, audit and outcomes monitoring. So the modalities are mammography, ultrasound, MRI, and now CEM as a separate section. So here's what it looks like. Ta-da! Very excited, right? Many of you say, finally, etc. So good things come to those who wait. Definitely, this is what this looks like. The V 2025 is a teamwork. Okay? We have the various section leaders. We have the opportunity and the privilege to have the ultrasound section. And I know we have many collaborators around the world. I want to recognize international collaborators like Dr. Chang in the audience, our speaker, who also contributed as an external reviewer. And these are my committee members for breast ultrasound that I would like to recognize the contributions. Dr. Baker, Schooley, Loving, and Raquel. Okay? All right. Teamwork. So let's now talk about ultrasound. Overview of Rads breast ultrasound. Of course, we don't have the time to talk about every single detail. So my goal here is really to outline for you sort of the big picture and to provide a framework so that you can go back and look at the actual Rads manual, or even just looking at the reference card when that becomes available, and have that in your head of how to place various pieces of data at the purpose. Okay? So overview of the ultrasound section. There are several components, and I'm going to list them for you. Okay? And they are, first, tissue composition. Second, masses. Third, non-mass lesions, something we talked about a bit already, in the morning. And fourth, calcifications. 5, associated features, so there are a number of them. Again, because of the sake of time, we're not going to talk about every one, but I want to give you the big picture. Special cases, and again, we're not going to have time to talk about all of them, but let's say that cysts and various types of cysts, like simple cysts, complicated cysts, etc., they fall under the category of special cases. And then lymph nodes. Okay? So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Non-mass lesions, we have a separate lecture on that in just a few minutes. Of course, the most important part, if you will, are masses and non-mass lesions. Those are the two primary manifestations of cancer at ultrasound. Yes, you can have skin thickening, true. You can even have calcifications, true. Okay? But for the most part, majority cancers at breast ultrasound is masses and non-mass lesions. And non-mass lesions is a new category. Controversial, and we'll have more time to talk about that in my second lecture. Okay? But now let's start with tissue composition. Tissue composition divided into two parts. Part number one, tissue pattern. Part number two, new element called glandular tissue component, or GTC. Okay? The tissue pattern was previously present in the 5th edition before. So these are the same terminologies. Homogeneous architecture, background fat, homogeneous background architecture, background glandular, and heterogeneous background architecture. This is the same as in the 5th edition, so not new. What's new is this part, the glandular tissue component. That's the new element. Okay? And you can kind of think about tissue pattern a little bit like breast density, a little bit, fatty, scattered glandular densities, heterogeneously dense, extremely dense, a little bit. But the glandular tissue component is the new element. Okay? And whether we should include that in BioRads or not, again, is very controversial. I would say that probably 80% of our ACR group did not think we should include it. Did not. Okay? Just because of the way Americans do breast ultrasound, it's thought to be too subjective, and we don't report it. What's the point? It leads to confusion, more work, But we nevertheless persevered and included it because we think it may move the needle, advance the field of breast ultrasound. Okay? It's optional for our radiologists in the United States. You don't have to use it. You don't have to talk about it. But we encourage, again, for learning to advance the field. Okay, so what is it? Well, this is the article, and Dr. Chang is one of the authors on the article from Korea 2021, where so much of the breast ultrasound research, especially in the screening setting, has been done. Suffice it to say that they looked at a lot of ultrasound in patients. Okay, so these are patients with dense breast screening, and they found that this is the area right here where cancers form. That is where lobules, terminal ducts, and stroma, the connective tissue, live, and this is where cancers form. Okay? And it happens in ultrasound that the stroma looks relatively white, or acogenic, or hyperechoic. And it happens that the ducts and the lobules look relatively dark, or gray, or hypoechoic. So when you use your eyes visually, you can kind of maybe assess, that you have a lot of fibroglandular that you have a lot of interlobular stroma that's more white, or a lot of the ducts and lobules that's more hypoechoic gray. Okay? So they are broken down to quartiles, 25 to 49, 50 to 74, and greater than 75, and these are the English words associated with it: minimal, mild, moderate, and marked, very similar to background enhancement at MRI, or to background enhancement and contrast enhancement. Okay? And you're like, okay, well, that's nice. What's the point? The point is that it may have biological and medical implications. High glandular tissue component, this, has been found to have little or no lobular involution and higher risk for breast cancer development. So again, going back to that patient care aspect. So we'll see. So just to show you that this is a current topic, this is January 2026, again from Korea, where these investigators looked not at screening, but at cancer patients. And they found that with these cancer patients has worse recurrence-free survival, they did worse when they have high GTC. Okay? So high glandular tissue component, not just for screening, but other implications for breast cancer development and prognosis. And I don't mean to say, oh, let's look at this paper, all the details and memorize it, but just to show you that GTC may be part of our clinical world. Okay, and looking forward to more data. All right. Okay, masses, non-manifestations, those are the ones that really are the primary manifestations of cancer at breast ultrasound. We're not going to talk about non-manifestations, just talk about masses, and a lot to talk about. So I showed you in yellow sort of the big areas that you should consider, and these are the same as the 5th edition in terms of the components. They are shape, orientation, margin, echo pattern, and posterior features. There's been a few changes in the words that we use, and I tried to show them to you in pink color to make you notice that. Okay? For example, lobulated is a new scriptor in terms of shape, and that goes somewhere between oval and round in terms. Oh, and I should say that in my Rads V 2025, everything, as much as possible, is listed from least suspicious to the most suspicious. So, oval is least suspicious, and irregular shape is most suspicious. Okay? And I put here in P non-parallel because the former term was not parallel, when we changed that to non-parallel. And in the former days, we had complex, cystic, and solid, and that's been changed to mixed, solid, and cystic. Okay? So just to show you overall, again, we won't have time to go through every single one, but I want to give you a framework, an idea of everything here. Okay? So shape, orientation, margin, pattern, and posterior features, with all these words within them. And of course, for example, margin, circumscribed is less suspicious, and non-circumscribed is more suspicious, and non-circumscribed, you can have indistinct, microlobulated, angular, and spiculated, spiculated being the most suspicious of the non-circumscribed terms. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, going on. Look, example, mammograms. You're like, that's not an ultrasound, okay, but it's okay. MLO on the left, CC on your right, that's a mass, right? What do you think of shape? Oval. Margins look fairly circumscribed, okay? And that has been there for a while. And I'll tell you that there are dystrophic calcifications here that have been stable, even though this is palpable. But the mass in the back there, upper posterior, that's the new one. And if you can look close, the margins do not look circumscribed. So here's your ultrasound, okay? Of the anterior mass is oval in shape, circumscribed margin, hypoechoic and equipattern. What do you think this is? Benign or malignant? What do you look like? Take a guess. I think I see some benign, okay? If it's benign, what do you think it is? What do you think this is histologically? Chances are, you know what it is. It's hypermelanoma, right? You know this every day. But look at the one in the back. That is not a hypermelanoma, right? That's round. It's spiculated, maybe. The margins. So that looks different. So use shape, use margin, okay, to help you come to the proper conclusion. And chances are, actually, that in that same patient, we have more ultrasound masses. Oval in shape, circumscribed in margin. Maybe this is lobulated in shape, okay, circumscribed in margin. So diagnosis, fibromatosis, and one invasive ductal. The point here is they're all masses, but shape and margin will help you determine what the proper interpretation and assessment and ultimately conform into the given pathology. All right. Next one. This is a classic example of new term, mixed, solid, and cystic. And this is your classic triple negative breast cancer. Okay? We'll talk more about that in the cases a little bit later. But here's your triple negative breast cancer, the cystic parts. This is the non-enhancing parts of MRI, and this is what it looks like in mammography after biopsy with All right, so that's quickly masses. We're not going to talk about non-massation. Let's talk quickly about calcifications. Okay? And I know we're an ultrasound group here, but in terms of clinical implementation and clinical lessons here, mammography is your friend in calcifications. It's mammography, 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 mammography. But we did change the calcifications component of ultrasound because we recognize that now we have better technology, better probes, better processing machine. So we can recognize that. So let's talk about that a little bit. Calcifications. So this is the 5th edition on the left. This is V 2025 on the right. Okay? We used to have calcification in the mass, calcification outside of the mass, and intraductal calcification. So now we separated it into micro and macro calcifications. Of course, micro calcifications suggest malignant, and macro calcifications suggest benign. Okay? And not just in a mass now, you can have an unmasked lesion. Okay? So you can have calcifications in a mass or non-mass lesion, or outside, or intraductal. So this is the V 2025, and this is the 5th edition, the older terms. Just because we recognize ultrasound technology has increased. Okay? All right. So, just a classic one. Macro or micro? How many of you say macro? How many of you say benign? Malignant? No, I'm showing you this, right? Fat necrosis, excellent. This is with the shadowing, macrocalcification, fat necrosis, Rads juvenile. As opposed to this, you guys see this? 1, 2, 3 little dots here. Micro or macro? Micro, right? Microcalcifications. This is Rads more suspicious. We're worried about carcinoma in situ. And you ask me for mammogram, do I hear you? Yes, mammogram. There you go, mammogram, right? Suspicious. We all agree? Okay. Stereotactic biopsy of this shows carcinoma in situ that was high grade. Okay? All right, macro. To finish up our lecture on Rads, these are the associated features. Okay. The pink is what's really changed more at V2025 from the 5th edition. Okay. Vascularity, this is Doppler. The terms have changed. Avascular, internal vascularity, and peripheral vascularity. Those are the V2025 terms. The ideas have not changed that much, but the terms have changed. We hope that these terms are clear. Internal versus peripheral. We don't have rim anymore, okay, for example. So we hope that these terms are clear. But what I wanted to really talk about is these two associated features, echogenic pseudocapsule and echogenic rind. Okay? Echogenic rind is a new term, these words, and that's been controversial already. Okay? So let me show you echogenic pseudocapsule and echogenic rind. This is an echogenic pseudocapsule. The term suggests that it's benign. Okay? I asked, if you remember 1990s, with Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt, but do you know Tom Stavros? Everybody here? Dr. Stavros is an American radiologist who did a lot of work on ultrasound, liver, and then breast. But he came up with the criteria for the solitary benign mass in the breast, which in the old days was called a nodule, but pseudocapsule was an important one. Okay, so an echogenic pseudocapsule is just benign. It is sharply demarcated and uniformly thin, like a little white line like this. Like this is the line. Okay? And it's usually associated with a mass of shape that's oval. Again, all sounding benign, suggesting benign. And of course, this is a fibroadenoma. As opposed to this, which echogenic rind suggests malignant. It is thicker and more variable in thickness and indistinct. It is not sharply demarcated. It is fuzzy, like this. I know sound effects, right? The Rads, okay? And then this is thicker than this part. And this mass could be any shape, including this shape. What do you think this shape is? Irregular, excellent, irregular, suggesting malignant. And of course, this is an invasive carcinoma, a breast cancer. You have to include that, the line part, in your measurement of the mass, because that has been shown to best correlate with the pathology of the actual tumor size when you excise it. Okay? Let's look at another case. This is a pretty big one, but let's look at a small one. This is a small one. In the middle, we have our 2D mammograms, and the MLO and the CC. And on the outer part, we have our tonal slices. And when you bring her, do a diagnostic workup, you can see that irregular shape, maybe spiculated margin. Cancer? Yeah, we're thinking cancer. Okay? We don't like it. And if we see it walking on the streets of the beach here tonight, I'm like, oh, I'm scared. I'm going to go to the other side. Okay? All right. What are you going to do next now with this? Ultrasound, right? Our friend. Well, we're here for ultrasound. So ultrasound shows this. Is this a correlate? Yeah. Location and size and your expectation. You thought it may be a cancer, and this looks like a cancer. Small. It's still cancer, right? You don't have to be big to be a cancer. And look at that. Look at this. What do we call that? The echogenic rind. And you want to include that in your measurement. Okay? And this was a 7mm invasive ductal carcinoma grade 2. All right. This has already been shown in data. Okay? This is recent in 2025 from the investigators at Duke University, where they looked at the echogenic rind, and they found that the echogenic rind is more specific than sensitive. It's more associated with invasive luminal A cancers as opposed to your triple negative breast cancers. And you should include that line part, because when you do, you will underestimate size less, decrease extent of size underestimation, meaning you're more accurate in predicting the tumor size when you include that line part, which is exactly what was said in my Rads as well. Is that clear, everybody? Okay, so good. So everybody's happy, lives in harmony. We like the term, right? But no. Okay. Dr. Mendelsohn, Dr. Berg wrote in the editorial, December 2025, where they said the peripheral epigenic zone is not aligned. Okay? Their feeling is that the line is hard, is fixed, versus this peripheral zone is infiltrated and cancers can spread. So they don't like the term. Okay? And they think it should be called the peripheral epigenic zone instead. And I show you this not to confuse you, not to say that, oh, is it a line, is it an epigenic zone, but to say that Rads is a living and breathing organism. It evolves. It will change. Okay? So I want to invite you to give us like ideas, share your data, so we can drive it forward to best match patient care. That's my point. That is not without controversy, because clearly there is already controversy, right? They said the peripheral epigenic zone is not the line, okay? So there's already controversy. Makes it more fun, right? What we do, okay? All right. And lastly, lymph nodes. I have a separate lecture this afternoon on lymph nodes. There's a lot more on lymph nodes in Rads, Speak 2025, compared with the previous edition. And that's all I'll say for now. So maybe you'll come back in the afternoon instead of going to the beach, okay? So we can talk more about lymph nodes in that session, okay? So thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to go